Workshop 2. Workshop 2.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IGF Open Forum session on AI for Sustainable Development, Country Insights and Strategies. Thank you also to everyone who's joining us online from around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, where you are. My name is Yuping Chan. I'm Head of Digital Partnerships and Engagements at the United Nations Development Programme's Digital AI and Innovation Hub. I'll be moderating today's session. And we're very pleased to organize today's session with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Co-Creation Hub Africa. Some of you might have been just at the session over in the other room about the international cooperation and the importance of international cooperation for AI. And here we're proud to complement that with really an in-depth look at what it means to advance AI to leverage to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals on a country level, really turning global discussions into in-country impact while examining the challenges from bias and exclusion to capacity and infrastructure. So to kick everything off, and perhaps this session will be a little bit different from what you've experienced before, is to have a little bit more of an interactive flow with members of the audience. And this is where we wanted to use Slido to really take the pulse of the conversations in the room and what you yourself are thinking. So I'd like to first start by inviting everyone, including our online audience, to engage through Slido. And this is where we have our UNDP colleagues moderating online as well. So I also encourage our online audience to participate in the discussions. So the first question that I want to ask everyone to answer via your phones and devices is on screen right now. And you can scan the QR code and enter your answer to this question of what topic or theme would you like to hear about in this particular discussion. And this will be a chance for our speakers also to reflect on the results and prepare your answers so that we can really try and interact with the audience here. And so as we're doing that and asking all of you to write back, to put in your responses via the Slido QR code. So scan the QR code, drop a word or phrase, there can be multiple words or phrases, and we'll see the responses come on screen. And as you're doing that, I also wanted to emphasize why from the United Nations Development Programme, this particular issue is so important. The question of how we leverage AI at the country level to achieve sustainable development. We are present in over 170 countries and territories around the world. We work with more than 130 countries now to leverage digital and AI to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And while we're tremendously optimistic about the role that AI can play in supporting sustainable development, we're also conscious of the significant AI equity gap that exists between the global south and the global north, and the question of how many people will potentially be left behind in this global AI revolution. And so we're working to close this equity gap in a number of ways that I'll mention before, and a lot of our speakers today are working in this very practical area as well. How do we leverage AI in novel and exciting ways to achieve sustainable development? So very quickly, a few more minutes to fill in your responses, especially also those online, while I introduce the panel as well. On site, we have Mr. Oluwaseun Adepoju, Managing Director at the Co-Creation Hub Africa. Online, we have Aubrey Anthony, non-resident scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Armando Guido Espanol, Network of Centers, and Anshul Sonak, who is Principal Engineer and Global Director at the Intel Digital Readiness Programs. So it's really a multi-stakeholder panel reflecting the best of the IGF. The idea that we both have government representatives, people from the international organizations, the technical sector, civil society, and really looking to see how we collectively as a community can come together. We also would have a representative from the Indian government, Additional Secretary Abhishek, but I believe he is actually in another session. Hopefully will come over shortly soon. So very quickly now, we have reflected on this first question. And here I think we see a number of results where we have, for instance, the three keywords of AI regulation, inclusion, capacity building, and I believe the last one is media, AI in the media. And I also see a very interesting number 2947217, which is possibly not a response. But you can see a little bit of the scale of the challenges, I think, that really are confronting us today with AI. But I'd also like the speakers perhaps reflect on the areas that are highlighted in green, because these seem to be top of mind among our audience, both online and in screen. And so, thank you for those reflections, inclusion, AI regulation, and AI media. Let's also take another second question. On a scale of 1 to 10, I ask the audience, how optimistic are you that AI can accelerate inclusive, sustainable development within the next 5 years? 1 means very pessimistic, and 10 means very optimistic. Okay, we're going towards the rather negative field. I see a lot of 3s. There's a bit of 6. And overall, the score seems to be 5.0, very evenly split in the room, with a rather strong emphasis on number 3, which is quite negative. So I think this is actually particularly interesting. We've actually done a survey at UNDP through our Human Development Report, which shows that overall, most people tend to be optimistic. So I'm wondering whether maybe it's the IGF community that slants us a little bit more towards the conservative side. But that's an interesting reflection that overall we are in the middle in terms of optimism about AI and its potential to accelerate inclusive, sustainable development. And I think perhaps that points to some of the challenges that we collectively are trying to address. All right, thank you for your responses on that. I'm going to start then to ask again the panel to reflect on perhaps what they've seen from the audience and maybe think about those in your responses to some of the questions. And again, we're going to have an opportunity for the audience to also come in as well to keep this a little bit more interactive. So let's start a little bit now by going to our distinguished panelists. And we'll start with, I believe, our Armando. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the question is really in terms of setting the scene. And I will ask this of all our panelists at the same time. How do you see the current landscape of leveraging AI for sustainable development?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for this invitation and to the UNDP, of course. And I think that it's, I really like the exercise of starting with these questions. I had been reflecting on this question as you shared with us with some time for preparation. And definitely, I think from the experience, so I'm here also representing the global network of Internet and Society Centers. We are a network, an academic network of 130 centers around the world. And we have been basically working on this topic and on these issues. And what we are trying to do is, of course, the first thing is that we are working on bringing more evidence about the impact of AI and what AI is really achieving, where are we standing, and basically try to navigate all these immense and big amount of information that we are processing. Decision makers are getting into a lot of information, evidence about the work that is going on right now, the kind of technologies available. So we want to really help decision makers, policy makers, and of course colleagues around the world to look into the kind of technologies that there are, the real features that we have, and the real impact of this technology. That's the other thing, that we really want to have access to good evidence of where is the impact and what's specifically the main issues related with AI. One of the things we have been going through is, for example, we are measuring the impact of AI in the future work. So we have been working with colleagues around the world, especially now with colleagues at MIT, and we have been developing this idea of an epoch or an analysis in order to analyze the real impact of AI, for example, in specific areas. And what we are seeing right now is that instead of replacement of jobs, for example, what we are seeing right now is augmentation, actually improvement in the work some workers around the world are developing, and actually AI being helpful in that sense. So this is just an example of how we need to gather this kind of evidence. We need to gather this kind of methodologies and analysis in order to make good decisions. And that's why I think we can achieve a sustainable use of this technology, at the same time sustainable development, because basically what we are doing is trying to really understand what the technology is doing. And in that sense, we have to reduce those big information asymmetries that we have right now. I think that it's good that we center ourselves on measuring the risks on AI, and that's also going to be extremely helpful for some of the conversations we're having on AI governance and AI regulation, as it has been also mentioned. But definitely we need good evidence in order for that process to take place in a way in which really it's going to be helpful for many countries. And perhaps the last point in this first remark that I would like to make is that we are seeing a lot of efficiencies being gained and a lot of benefits also from the use of the technology. That's something that we really need to highlight. Of course, there are cases in which the technology is not being used for the best purposes, but we also see that there are some benefits, and that's something in which basically we want, especially countries from majority world, global south countries, to understand and have enough elements to determine how to better use and deploy these technologies in their society. So that's the kind of work we're trying to do, building capacity by building evidence, by taking this evidence into those decision makers and trying to promote also research and local research in many regions around the world, and also to provide collaborations in that sense. So that's what we are doing. And hopefully that's first good glance of the kind of work ahead and some of the challenges that in which we are working right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amardo. I think that landscape of knowing what the challenges are and really having the kind of information that we have to make sure that there are informed decisions about the use of AI is particularly important. Let me go to Aubrey now and ask her how she sees the current landscape of leveraging AI for sustainable development.
Thanks so much, Yuping, and thanks to UNDP broadly and my fellow panelists. It's an important discussion. I'm looking forward to diving in with you all and those in the audience as well. So Yuping, you asked about the current landscape. The way I see it is both promising and fraught for a few different reasons. The first reason that I want to point out is just with AI, I think the risk that we face in the context of the SDGs and inclusion has to do with digital divides that have been longstanding for many years. And with AI, I think we see the risk that those digital divides become more calcified, and they're linked to a few different things. In the context of tech broadly, but also specifically with AI, I think we see that power is becoming incredibly concentrated, right? With just a few multinational players dominating the discourse, dominating the priority setting, and dominating the types of business models that end up getting pushed out. And sometimes often these business models aren't serving the populations that are most in question when we consider how we achieve the SDGs, right? The notion that bigger is better, a lot of these different themes and narratives end up not really well serving our priorities for the SDGs. And I think that the concern is that the broad trend lines are just a continued entrenchment of that concentration, and it ends up that field-shaping decisions, really consequential decisions, continue to be made in ways that benefit those who are already benefiting the most from AI, both in terms of financially, but also, as Armando said, the kind of information asymmetries, et cetera. And the resources that are needed to disrupt that are globally very scarce. So just as an example, Africa currently accounts for only 0.1% of the world's computing capacity, and just 5% of the AI talent in Africa has access to the compute power it needs as a result. And beyond that, on the data front, even though something like 2,000 of the world's 7,000 languages are spoken on the continent, those languages are considered under-resourced in the context of NLP because there just isn't, or historically hasn't been, enough digital data on them to train LLMs, right? And so these different issues of inclusion crop up when you think about the way that concentration is affecting access globally. But there's also opportunity there, right? So if you flip it on its head, because of those constraints, I think we've seen some really amazing innovations emerge around building AI that's more robust, right? And less compute intensive or less energy intensive with the development of so-called smaller language models and things like this, right? Innovations that are better suited to the challenges at hand, the constraints at hand. Many firms have managed to do really groundbreaking work in light of those limitations, and in doing that, they offer a really fantastic alternative model to this kind of brute force, bigger is better ethos that's been dominating the AI playing field. So firms like Lilapa AI, who have developed the small language model Incubi LM, that stands to serve, hundreds of millions of low resource language speakers. So there are promising signals as well as the more pessimism-inducing ones. So kind of in line with the Slido results, I think we see both sides of the spectrum coming up. Just very quickly, I think there's a couple of other points here that are worth highlighting in terms of the landscape of AI. So there's, I think, also this sense of perceived urgency and a mentality of catch up among many countries, right? If you don't catch up, you'll be left behind. And this is very much tied to the digital divide. It's a growing concern, especially in the context, again, in the context of Africa, which is where we've been focusing a lot of our research over the last several months. Some projections show that GDP growth attributed to AI may be 10 times lower or more in Africa than the AI-fueled growth elsewhere. And so that really creates this sense of urgency. And it's not just keeping up with your neighbors, keeping up with the Joneses. It's really often coming from this perception that AI can serve as an accelerant of much needed economic development. And so sometimes that's good, but broadly, it's also, I think, and this is an important thing for us to discuss as a community, I think that, again, the flip side of that is that broadly it's tough right now to create the space that's needed to ensure that we're seeing AI as just another tool in the toolbox, and the arsenal of tools that we have available that we can apply for what are often very systemic, political and socially rooted issues, right? Reduction of poverty, gender inequality, climate change, right? The AI is one tool in the toolbox. And when you have this sense of urgency, that can both help drive the conversation of how we leverage those tools to suit our needs. But I think it also risks forcing us to adopt a solution that may not always match the problem, right? And as Armando pointed out, ensuring that we have the evidence that helps us make the decision of when AI is the right tool for the issue. So I think that's one of the current challenges that we face. And then I have a third point that I'll talk about more later when we have a little bit more time, and it's really just around funding, right? I think a lot of the issues that we see right now have to do with the disparities in funding that with the diminishment of US foreign assistance and with others, foreign assistance profiles becoming smaller, I think that really creates an additional urgency around how we address some of these problems. But in the interest of time, I'll leave it there and we can talk a little bit more about that later.
Actually, I do think that question about funding will be an interesting one. It will also be good to hear from voices in the room as to what they feel about this particular moment, because I do think that that is that moment of urgency. We couldn't agree more with this point about the importance of bringing the Global South and focusing on Africa. This is why, for instance, UNDP just launched last week in Rome the AI Hub for Sustainable Development, which was with the Italians as part of the G7 presidency, that is really focused on accelerating AI adoption in Africa and really focusing on African countries and empowering and strengthening local AI ecosystems in Africa. So on the point of Africa, let me turn to Oluwasuan, who is here with us in the room. In your work at the Co-Creation Hub, what do you see as the current landscape of leveraging AI for sustainable development and the challenges there?
Thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists who have spoken before me. I think they've raised a lot of important points there. But practically in the work that we do and what we observe every day, I want to point to four major things. Number one is that when we talk about AI for sustainable development and the excitement that comes with the potentials and the opportunities that AI brings to the society, we usually don't also talk about the balance that we need to create for the unintended consequences of artificial intelligence. And in the work that we do, being the Pan-African Innovation Enabler, we've seen how as the models are getting smarter and bigger and big data is, becoming easy to, process, there's also the heavy consumption of energy, right? And in some of the work we've done recently, we've been benchmarking what led to transition from proof of work to proof of stake in blockchain. And now that can actually be a future iteration for some of the unintended consequences of AI when it comes to energy as well. And number two trend that we are seeing is the transition of artificial intelligence from the stage of hype to the stage of hope. I believe every new technology goes through three stages. The stage of hype, where there's a fear of missing out and everybody's dropping investment, everybody's talking about it. And I think Obra mentioned the fact that there's that pressure from countries and organizations not to miss out in the AI race. And when we use the word race for a new technology, it's very obvious that everybody wants to take part and nobody wants to be a last comer to the table when it comes to artificial intelligence. But we've seen that we're transitioning gradually from hype to hope. We can see use cases that we can point to. That is driving confidence in a lot of ways. And I also believe that the third stage, which is the stage of truth, we're going to get there. But before we transition from hope to truth, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to have a lot of losses. And we're also going to see a lot of success at the end of the day. But I think the stage that we are now requires a lot of intentionality in the way we innovate with the technology and also using a multi-stakeholder approach to building AI solutions. We've seen that a lot of people are technologically excited about AI, but some of the work we do in education requires that we bring at least 32 types of professionals in the room, especially when we're building AI for EdTech, especially solutions that include children. And also, for example, to build a very useful EdTech solution for children in Africa, for example, you need behavioral scientists, you need linguists to be in the room, you need AI ethicists or technology ethicists in the room, you need safeguarding professionals, you need people who can look at the technology stacks and in terms of digital security as well. So that multi-stakeholder approach, we've started seeing it, especially in countries like Nigeria and Rwanda, where it's no longer about the technical people, but also multi-stakeholder approach to building technology solutions. And I think the third thing I want to mention is the linguistic equity. And a lot of people, because for AI, we see it across board, two classifications, the technology optimists and the technology skeptics. Some skeptics believe that linguistic equity in artificial intelligence is just a talk and it's not concrete. But the truth is that for AI to be local and to be impactful in the grassroots, linguistic equity is very important, and we've started seeing some work in that area. Obra mentioned people building small language models, and this is because we need linguistic equity to build stacks and for some of the languages that are missing. And for us, we do a lot of benchmarking and testing of some of the large language models, and believe me, we still have a long way to go in linguistic equity for some of the low-resourced African languages. So there's a lot of work in evidence, and also to ensure that AI is first of all local, and it's building features that helps people benefit from the technological dividends at the lowest level possible.
Again, this is where we also, as UNDP, also see that priority in focusing on the areas that you had mentioned. So for instance, when it comes to linguistic diversity, we've been working in countries such as Ghana around low-resource languages and looking towards digitalizing those languages to create precisely what you said, that kind of inclusive models that can then serve the engine of AI. On the multi-stakeholder element, where, again, this is something that unites us all at the IGF and that you have actually mentioned, I'm glad now we can actually turn to Anshul, who is actually part of Intel and the work that Intel is doing to build digital readiness and capacity. Anshul, few reflections from you perhaps on what are the needs and what is the current situation with regards to AI for sustainable development.
Thanks, Yiping. Good morning. So calling from Silicon Valley, this is very interesting conversation. This is 6 a.m. for me in the morning. Hello,
Thank you for
everyone.
being there.
Appreciate, and I'm really hearing all the comments by all my fellow panelists and 100% agree with everything. As a rural development professional coming from a rural village in India, living in Silicon Valley, I exactly live this conversation every day. So really appreciate all the comments made by fellow panelists. From my reflection standpoint, I look at it, this is two big strands emerging in this space. One is sustainable AI itself. So how do we make AI more local, more clean, more green, more safe, more private, more fast, more cheap? So this is all about AI technology itself. So that's one conversation where we need to be paying attention at all levels. But the second, and probably more relevant to this audience, what can AI do for larger sustainability? So it's not a technology conversation. It's a truly a developmental conversation. What does AI for sustainability truly mean? Now, research again shows enough that more than, I think there was a Nature research 2 years back, more than 79% of SDGs can be addressed with artificial intelligence if used responsibly and appropriately. So this gives a big opportunity and big challenges. That's the true reflection. I mean, opportunity-wise, it can be a potential big equalizer. It's truly a new electricity. So everything can change once electricity comes in your home, right? Uh, just from a personal productivity standpoint, if you really use AI appropriately, we just did a research recently which shows that you can save roughly 15 hours of your time every week if you use AI for your own personal productivity. So, and then you can figure out how to use that time more responsibly for more value creation for yourself and your life, right? So that's an opportunity side. Challenges side, of course, I mean, we heard about AI divide argument, right? Not just technology divide, but there are much bigger asymmetries which are getting caused here. There's a gender divide, there's a racial divide, there's a color divide, there's a country divide. All these asymmetries which are emerging, if we want to be a truly inclusive and responsible society, we really need to have this conversation on how do we bring it together and create some kind of an equalization for a long-term sustainability. So there are opportunities and challenges in AI for sustainability itself, and has to be a separate conversation on how to make AI itself more sustainable. These are the two big reflections. I'm happy to kind of be in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Anshul. And now we're joined by Additional Secretary Abhishek Singh from the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology of the Government of India. And then I think it might be a good time to come back to that slide that we had at the start. And this is where we actually polled both the online participants as well as those in the room to ask them actually what was top of mind for them in terms of the conversation here and what to reflect on. And so those areas in green were actually what came up as sort of the areas that they like to hear about when it comes to AI for sustainable development. And so I turn to you very quickly for a quick response on these and what you see as the state of the field when it comes to leveraging AI for sustainable development.
See, like the thing that CF, the response, like of course regulation, inclusion, capacity building is very, very important. But when we look at sustainability in issues for AI, I would say that the energy use, especially with regard to when we build compute systems for AI applications and models, the amount of energy that is needed for powering these systems is very, very high. To the extent that normally, in fact, now we are going to black wells and B200, which are more energy intensive. But I was told that even an H200 consumes power equivalent to one US home. So when we are building applications and when we are trying to save time, as Anshul was mentioning, when we are trying to push on productivity, when we are trying to push on benefits in various sectors, we also have to see where do we balance the SDG objectives for renewable energies, for climate, with regard to more efficient computing systems. At some level, we'll have to see that the benefits of AI applications and models should not outweigh the costs that come in because of high energy usage. So this will require extensive research in building compute systems which are low energy consuming. This will involve more investments in renewable energies. This will involve limiting the use of AI for non-essential functions, like things that humans can do better. Why do we need to rely on using AI for doing the same things? Like people, like when ChatGPT came in, we found people using it for very simple tasks like writing poems and writing text or summarizing text. So we need to kind of prioritize that which are the tasks which AI should do, which are the tasks that AI need not do. How do we kind of limit the energy consumption for powering AI systems? How do we prioritize usage of AI? How do we kind of how do we not ignore the needs of the challenges that climate change poses? How do we reduce our carbon footprint? So these are issues that I think are as important as the issues related to AI regulation or inclusion and building capacities.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. So we're now going to turn back to the panel and ask all of you to reflect on a little bit of what you've heard from fellow panelists, as well as what you see from the responses of the audience on the screen, and link that to perhaps a small tailored question based on your expertise in your areas of experience. I'll start with Aubra, I think. And I want to pick up on a point that you had raised just now, and now I think has been picked up by a couple of other colleagues as well, around that question of funding and governance. And I find it particularly interesting because India, for instance, will be chairing the next AI Action Summit. And so in that question of governance and funding, how do you think funding models are shaping national AI ambitions when it comes to the global majority? And how can we as an international community address some of these challenges there?
Yeah, thanks, Yuping. And yeah, a very auspicious time, really. I mentioned earlier some of the issues that I think we're all tracking. Right, the U.S. foreign assistance has been effectively shuttered. Many of the largest bilateral donor governments and NGOs, philanthropies have also kind of moved to shift away from historical levels of foreign assistance. So right now, it's unfortunately a pretty precarious time for funding not just AI applications, but the necessary components of AI ecosystems globally, right? So the fundamental ecosystem strengthening that needs to be in place for AI to be leveraged in a responsible, sustainable way by locally impacted actors, as Shun mentioned, right? Like the enablers that are really key to having an ecosystem thrive, things like compute, interoperable privacy-preserving data systems, the talent that's necessary, right? The capacity in country to be able to design these systems, which, a lot of that may fall more into the realm of DPI than AI uniquely, but I think that's absolutely part of this conversation, right? But even with those trends, I think there's also a very strong growing recognition that given the scale and the scope of the need, supporting ecosystem development through these kind of historical donor-led, siloed, uncoordinated investment really leads to a sum that's far less than just the addition of its parts. So because of that, I think in large part, there's been an increase in recent years in these more collaborative pooled funding efforts, right? We've seen this with the AI for D Funders Collaborative that was launched in 2023 at Bletchley Park. The current AI, Public Interest AI initiative that was launched earlier this year at the Paris AI Action Summit. Yuping, you mentioned the UNDP and Italian government's launch of the AI Hub earlier this month or last month, which is very exciting. And then we'll see what comes from the Indian summit next year, right? Like there are a lot of different efforts that I think are trying to meet the moment and hopefully moving us in a better direction. But so part of the landscape and part of this kind of broader conversation needs to recognize that these larger, more multilateral, more multi-stakeholder funding initiatives that can honestly really better address the scale of the challenge financially are emerging, but they're also kind of introducing new complexities and new challenges for those who are having to navigate that, right? So whether that's governments, practitioners, the people who are having to navigate AI ecosystem strengthening are having to navigate a lot of different trends and trend lines. And I'm going to say something that I think Shun mentioned earlier, and we all hopefully at this point agree on, but if we don't, I would love to get into more discussion here. But I think the assertion that I want to make here is that for AI to really deliver for the SDGs and for sustainable development broadly, it cannot be something that is helicoptered in from afar, right? Its development and deployment have to involve communities impacted by AI. Its governance has to involve the communities who are impacted by AI. And the problem is that critically, the funding paradigm historically has really not aligned with that as well. It's really been more about AI that's produced elsewhere reaching foreign shores. And so I think the way that we see this shaping out is really going to have a fundamental effect on whether we can actually achieve this goal that I think we all share of better leveraging AI for sustainable development. And I think there's been a really solid movement amongst the ICD4D community over the last several years with the principles for digital development and kind of a recognition that the funding paradigm needs to shift and it needs to be more localized and we need to better appreciate all of that. But we at Carnegie, we've been doing a lot of research on this and trying to understand where the funding needs are really best matched by what's on supply and where there are divergences, right? Where there's kind of a market inefficiencies that are coming up there. And so just very quickly, I'll share at a high level some of the things that we found through these, the interviews, the consultations that we've been doing. Oh, sorry. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to give enough time to all the panelists and hopefully have some questions from the floor. So if you don't mind, I think the Carnegie research actually sounds very interesting, and perhaps you could share some links in the chat for everybody to consult if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I was going to say we're going to be publishing this soon, so hopefully everyone can see this, but I can give you the three key takeaways from the different research that we've done around the funding that we've, discussions that we've had. It's basically, and I think we can get into more detail in the chat, funding must be structured to be non-extractive, and I think this is a key thing that's come up in other comments as well. It must be capable of becoming self-sustaining at some point, even if it's not at the outset, right? If donors are coming in to fund, there needs to be some path towards sustainability in the long term, whether that's through engagement with the commercial sector or otherwise. And then also lastly, and again, happy to share more links to this, but we really need to ensure that the way that funding is structured and supports ecosystem development plays to different stakeholders' strengths, both in terms of what's being brought to the table, but also how risk aversion factors in. And I think those are really big issues that often go unappreciated, especially when you have a lot of different stakeholders coming together, which is what's critical here. Again,
Right.
interest of time, I'll stop there, but thanks so much for the yeah.
Thank you, Aurora. And actually, that again is a nice segue into OS1 when she mentioned, for instance, the role of ecosystems and entrepreneurial ecosystems. That's where, for instance, your work at the AI Hub working directly with tech innovators is relevant. And how are you supporting that work? And what do you think in response to some of the areas of challenge that have already been highlighted so far?
Thank you so much. Quickly, we've, when I mentioned earlier that there is hype around AI in the early days, I think if you look at some of the amount of money that has gone into supporting AI innovators in Africa, we've not gotten at least even 2% of that investment, because in the early days, all the innovators were just using ChatGPT to do summarization, and they'll put a label on it that they were building AI companies. But in recent times, we've seen that you can no longer do that. And one of the strategies we used is to say, you are not just an AI company by just name. What are the core societal issues that you're using AI to solve, right? And then recently, we're supporting innovators using integrating artificial intelligence and DPI, because I think we need to start connecting artificial intelligence to core societal issues. Or, there's also the situation of breaking what is not broken, or trying to fix what is not broken with artificial intelligence, right? So if, for example, a state in Nigeria has a social register that they use in distributing farm produce or seed input or farm input to farmers, right? But the state has been, struggling with actually identifying the trends of who they're giving the seed to. What does the trend look like in terms of output as well? That's an instance of using artificial intelligence to get output, rather than build something that, we are all excited when you present it or when you talk about it, but when you look at the practicalities of the application, it's not really, solving any issue, right? So for us, we are very intentional around AI solutions that are connected to core societal issues. When you need to traverse the Maslow hierarchy of need, you will not waste the little investment we have on white label, AI projects. We want to see use cases. And I think, some of the monetary commitment that comes to us as an organization to support innovators building AI solution, we are not in a hurry, because there's that pressure to quickly demonstrate that something works. We're not in a hurry. If we're unable to get 10 use cases, we are fine. If we find 2 or 3 that works and solves practical societal issues, we are good with that. But there's also the quick idea that you need to commercialize. I think it takes a while for us to demonstrate good use cases of artificial intelligence, and that's why some of the work we do now, we based it on the public value theory, first of all, and not support the startups on the commercialization side first, because once commercialization pressure comes, you begin to compromise on the safety of what you're building. So we usually give ourselves at least 1 year for you to actually prove that what you're working on is good, it solves problem, it's safe, and it's equitable in so many ways. And then you can now start talking about your commercialization trail. So we usually work with patient capital now because, this innovation that needs patience must not be brought under pressure of commercialization, first of all. And I think that's what some of the big techs are compromising on when it comes to some of the conversations around safety, around equity, and the good use of people's data. There are so many tools that we've been experimenting with that we know fundamentally this is ethically wrong in the way the data is scraped to be able to feed those models, and we must not repeat that. And that is why for us AI is local and must be built by local people. And lastly, I'm very happy that we saw a capacity building on that side of the responses from people. For us, we're doing a year-long module on AI for Business Masterclass, where we gather business people all across Africa, representing 33 countries every month, where we have conversations around for them to really understand artificial intelligence. Because sometimes when the society don't understand a technology, we usually launch a very complex socio-technical solution on people which they don't understand how to use in the first place. When people understand, they're able to contribute meaningfully and they're able to use meaningfully as well.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very comprehensive answer that touches on many aspects. And I'd like to maybe turn to Abhishek here to really reflect on that, because India has been a leader in the use of digital technologies, AI, and so forth. So reflecting from a macro level on some of the challenges that Suren has actually mentioned, how has India actually addressed some of these? And how do you balance a lot of the challenges that he's spoken about to be able to become really a global leader in all these aspects?
See, when you look at AI or when you look at digital public infrastructure solutions, one thing that one should keep in mind is that all these solutions are sustained and are actually can be scaled up and be used by most people if they are actually addressing a problem statement. If they're helping solve a problem, then there are ways and means to make it happen, make it commercially viable, make it public funding available, if it results in larger social and economic benefits. For example, we had this sort of problem of financial inclusion. We had this challenge of people not having access to banking services, financial services, credit services, insurance services. And one key reason because of that happening was that people didn't have an ID to prove that who they are so that they can get access to a bank account, something as basic as that. That was the genesis of the UID, the Aadhaar project that we implemented way back in 2010. And today we have 1.4 billion unique IDs, biometric unique IDs given to people that has helped open 510 million bank accounts, zero-frills bank accounts, and that allows us to do direct benefit transfers for all benefits that citizens need, and that addresses a lot of needs. It has led to microfinance schemes. It has led to credit schemes. It has led to farmers getting insurance schemes. So when you build a digital public platform like ID, it resulted in a lot of spin-off benefits because all the leakages that were happening in public service programs was cut. People could benefit because they could take up livelihoods. And once livelihoods improves, economy benefits, a lot of benefits come in. Similar for digital payments, like we realized that many people were out of the organized financial systems because they did not have any tools they were not eligible for a credit card or a debit card, and they're not able to do transactions, digital transactions. So with that came the unified payment interface, UPI as we call it. And today we do almost 20 billion UPI transactions a month. And we account for almost 50% of digital transactions globally. And that has empowered small businesses, that has empowered people, street vendors, and they have made them become part of the formal economy. And again, benefits come in. So similarly, when we are looking at AI-based applications, again, we'll have to look at what problem statements we are solving. Like, for example, if you look at healthcare, one key challenge that we have is that for diagnosing tuberculosis or diagnosing diabetic retinopathy, we do have hospitals which have got X-ray machines and which have got radiological machines, but very often we don't have expert qualified radiologists available in the rural hospitals. So therein, if there is an AI tool which can do diagnosis which is as correct or in times better than a human radiologist, then that tool can replace the human radiologist in that hospital. And if it's offering that service, the health department, health ministry will be able to meet the costs for that. Similarly, if you look at education, there are a lot of needs of personalized learning plans. There are a lot of needs for augmenting the availability of science and maths teachers in rural areas where those teachers are not there, or helping children with special needs get access to lesson plans, get access to content that they might be more useful for them, create content in all Indian languages. We are a diverse country. So therein, again, AI-based applications can create a lot of value, and there will be public funding available for taking up such solutions. There will be people who are willing to pay for such solutions. So again, if it solves that problem statement, it becomes very useful. We have seen that similar things coming in agriculture, wherein AI-based applications, farmer advisories is helping farmers increase their incomes, reduce their input costs, reduce the water that they use for irrigation, do timely interventions for fertilizers, for pesticides, access the right markets, the right prices. So when the farmers benefit economically, they will be willing to pay a cost for that. So if we design AI-based applications across sectors so that it solves some social needs or it addresses some economic benefits, there will be a provision for funding them. There will be a provision for building a commercial model out of that. And then those are the solutions only that will ultimately be sustained.
Thank you very much. And then I really want to still try and give some opportunity for some questions from the floor. So I'm going to ask Amado and Anshul, if you don't mind, to try and keep your responses to a minute. Very quickly, from your respective perspectives as academia and research, as well as the private sector, reflections on what you've heard so far and any thoughts that come to mind. Maybe we start with Amado.
Sure. Well, yeah, in a minute. I was just going to say that we really need to focus more on implementation and what is working or not. And especially we need to see the efforts that are being doing on implementing several of the policies and some of the ideas that have been shared here. I think that we need to understand where are those accelerators of the implementation side and what is working and what is not, because also we have to be very context aware of how this process is taking place. And that will allow us probably to be a little bit more efficient with the resources that we're having and a little bit more accurate in the kind of support that we're receiving and also the support that we're giving in that sense. So I think understanding more of that process, we need to analyze a little bit more of the implementation side, what is working, and we need to start delivering more results in that sense. From all fronts, I think it's very important right now. So that's my minute. Thank you.
That was a great minute. Anshul, over to you.
Yeah, my minute, I mean, this requires balanced, responsible public-private partnership and a great leadership. You have Abhishek sir sitting on the stage, and his ministry, for example, really prepare this capacity building tools for population scale impact. Look at their example, AI for All, for engaging public. Look at their example on education, what they have been doing with companies like Intel and others. Employability, entrepreneurship. So these 4 E's, right? Engagement of public, entrepreneurship, education, and economic development using employability, right? Creating a right public-private partnership model is very important, and hence the civil society dialogue is very critical.
Great. Thank you. Okay, before I open the floor, very quickly, another Slido so we can all check in here. The Slido that you see that Megan is now going to put on screen that you can answer via your QR codes is going to be on the question of, having heard all these conversations, based on your own experiences and so forth, what do you think should be the #1 priority for supporting or enabling an inclusive AI ecosystem? In one word or phrase, what should be the #1 priority if we are to ensure an inclusive AI ecosystem? And you can't repeat the answer that you gave for the first question. So let's try not to have the same answers that we saw just now. Capacity building has come up again. So despite my entreaty to you to try and have another answer, this clearly is a priority. One word. What is the priority for ensuring an inclusive AI ecosystem? And then I'm going to ask colleagues as well to start thinking of the question that you'd like to ask our distinguished panelists. And I will ask the distinguished panelists again to try and keep the answers short so we can try and hear from as many people as possible. I will start, I think, with one question that we have in the chat while those in the room are still doing the QR code. How can IGF, WSIS, and other international stakeholders continue to support the adoption of AI and digital healthcare systems in Africa to achieve sustainable development, especially in this era of digital transformation and health globally today? I think Abhishek talked a little bit about the Indian experience and specifically how health is actually particularly important here. I'll ask you if you have any quick responses to that and maybe turn to the other panelists as well. So to this question of digital health, especially in Africa.
Yeah, in fact, what I would like to say is that what we are looking to doing, especially as part of the Impact Summit that we are hosting in February, is that adopt the DPI playbook that we have, in which we built DPI, we built a repository for DPI applications and made it available for the whole world, especially the countries of the global south. Similarly, the AI-based applications in healthcare, whether it is for cataract screening or whether it's for diagnosing breast cancer or for tuberculosis or for diabetic retinopathy or similar use cases, those solutions will be made available as part of a AI use case repository, and any countries of the global south, especially countries of Africa, African Union, if they are wanting to use those solutions, we will be more than happy to offer those solutions for adoption in these countries with the necessary fine-tuning it with the local data sets as may be needed.
And that really speaks to responsible AI, which is also right up there on the QR responses. Any questions from the floor here? Participants that are sitting here have heard the conversation, the distinguished panelists, and would like to ask a question or comment. I think I saw a gentleman over there. You can come up to the mic right here if you'd like to say something. Yes, please.
Thank you. Is this mic on? A question for Mr. Abhishek. The Indian DPI model was very much rolled out in a partnership between the Indian government and the private sector, like letting that kind of agile, quick mindset into government and then using open source, using interoperability to roll that out and doing that mix of governance. Do you see a change in that approach from the very sort of deterministic kind of applications that came out, building on top of an Aadhaar, building on top of a UPI, so the ID of the payments? Does that approach change with AI, or do you think it's the same way that you're going to be thinking about building AI applications on top of your DPI?
It's going to be similar. It's going to follow the similar playbook that we had for the DPI. And while in DPIs, as you rightly mentioned, we build the basic building blocks like the Aadhaar or the UPI or the data layer, and then various applications for various sectors were built on top of that. In AI, what we look at, what we are doing is that we are providing the basic ingredients for building AI applications, which include providing access to affordable compute to all those who need it, especially AI developers, startups, researchers, academicians, students. So we have made available almost 35,000 GPUs at a very low cost of $1 per GPU per hour for those who are needing it. Then we are also enabling a datasets platform called AI Kosh, wherein datasets from across domains, across sectors, both from the public and the private sector, will be made available. And again, researchers will need compute and will need data sets and the skills that they have to build AI applications. And similarly, we are also providing tools for bias mitigation, for privacy preservation, for identifying deep fakes. So all those tools which are required to test your applications for conformance to the responsible AI principles are also being provided on a common platform. So all the necessary ingredients which will be common for those who are fine-tuning or those who are doing inferencing or those who are building sector-wise applications will be provided as a common utility, similar to the DPI model. So that's how we are going ahead with our AI development.
Thank you, Abhishek. Any other questions from participants here? Our in-person audience here at the IGF? Yes. And please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, this is Jasmine Koo from Hong Kong. So I heard about a concept about localizing the AI applications. So also a thing that I heard about is the local people need to build their own AI system. So my question is, because there may be national level, when you say local, do you mean like national level, regional level, or even from a grassroots community? And I just want to clarify what you mean. Someone mentioned about like the local people need to build their own AI system. And is there a way to measure or help those local people to efficiently build a system with the knowledge and a system to track the performance? Because when you're helping them, you have to put yourself into their shoes. So how does it come into an efficient way to do that? Thank you very much.
Maybe I'll ask Yoon to take the question, and then maybe I'll ask Armando also to reflect on this question on measurement, and also then turn it over to other panelists.
Yes, thank you so much. When we say local, it could mean the three examples you shared. For example, when you're building agricultural stacks, for example, I'll use the example of plantain. there are different classifications of it's a form of banana, right? Plantain, right? And we've tested a number of foreign models that does not cater for that classification of plantain. So when we say local, that means that people that came from the region where plantain is, originated from, and those who have the history of the classification needs to contribute to it, right? That's one of the examples when we say local. But also, some of the work we do in northern Nigeria, for example, when we work with farmers or, vulnerable groups, when you want to use their data, for example, for social welfare distribution from the government, for example, in regions where there's flooding or there's extreme poverty, we usually go back to them to ask for the permission to use their data and what we're using their data to do, right? And that is why we use an SMS system where you get a prompt, you say yes or no for us to use your data for the process we're building. That doesn't mean that we're not using their data for good, it's for their good, but also we need to let them know what the data is being used for, right? Also in terms of contribution, and what we mean by local as well does not mean that the local people are the technical people building it, but they are aware and they are contributing to the stacks or a knowledge session or even a validation session of what you're building for them, so that at the end of the day, people believe that they co-created the AI solution that they are using. And trust me, when you connect AI and DPI, for example, you need the buy-in of the people. For us to build anything in like a 6-month project, we spent the first 2 or 3 months just engaging the people, co-creating the problem statement with them, and then they contribute to the feedback when we build the first iteration of the solution. So that at the end of the day, the buy-in is almost automatic because they've been part of the journey. We've seen situations where people have invested millions of dollars on solutions, tech solutions that people rejected. A typical example, not even technology this time around, I think in Sudan, for example, the government built a well for people to use because of water issues. But after building that, the government discovered that the people still go to the local wells to go and fetch. And they asked them the question, why are you going to the local, your walking distance to fetch water again? And the women said, that is the only time we have to catch up, in the evenings when we walk, when we take a walk to where we usually fetch water, and yet potable water has been built in those communities for them. So for us to avoid unintended consequences of the technology we're building, it's good for it to be local. And that is the definition of local in the context of what I said.
Okay. Thank you so much. Armando and then Aubrey very quickly, and then we're going to go back to a last round of one-liners from very quickly to the audience. Armando and then Aubrey, and then I see 2 very quick questions here. Armando, in 30 seconds.
Perfect, not 30 seconds. No, well, I was just going to say that definitely this is very contextual again. I think we can talk about regional or local or national infrastructure and technologies being provided. That's something that depends. So, for example, in Latin America, we're having some cases of LLMs being developed for the whole region as a regional project. We will see some elements that will succeed, others that will, of course, not deliver as expected. So this is still very challenging. And I think the big element for me is the governance of these technologies and this kind of public infrastructure that we are building. Who is being involved and what's the kind of participation, stakeholder participation, and who is taking part in the decisions being made about the functioning, the training, and the whole development of this kind of infrastructure, which is critical for many sectors. So there's also some perhaps food for thought about the governance of this technology, of this infrastructure, and of course of many of the related projects that we are going to be seeing with the use of this technology, and that will have a sector and national, regional impact, of course. So just for us to consider at the same time, not only the technology, but also the governance side.
Aubrey,
thank you.
Over to you. Thank you so much, Armando.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think I would just plus one everything that Shun mentioned around the need for engagement. It's not, when we talk about local contributions, it's not just about tech expertise that needs to be brought in. It's also about just engagement with the community and user-centered design, human-centered design specifically. And we've seen a range of examples where that's been done really effectively. And also, importantly, ways that those opportunities for engagement can be turned into opportunities for capacity development. And so I don't think we have time to go into it, but we can share a number of links of where that's been done effectively. I'm thinking specifically of Togo in the context of COVID. They worked initially to develop a model for delivery of cash benefits with, a university partner far, far away, and then transitioned that to a real strategic goal for the government of capacity development in country based from those learnings, kind of moving toward more sovereign approaches to developing AI from that experience. And so I think there's a spectrum of ways that kind of local focus can look different across different contexts. But I think there's a rich body of examples to draw from for that.
I think we're out of time, so I'm very sorry to those who wanted to ask questions here, but the speakers will be available for a little bit. I'm going to ask Anshul and then Abhishek for their last sort of 10-second wrap-up. But at the same time, I just wanted to give the audience a chance to reflect on the question that we asked at the start. On a scale of 1 to 10, and to see if your opinions have changed since we asked the question just now, you recall that the results ended up at about the even 5.5 level where we were equally optimistic and pessimistic. So after having heard this conversation, on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you that AI can accelerate inclusive sustainable development over the next 5 years? Then I'll ask Anshul and then I'll ask Abhishek for their last comments. Anshul.
Yeah, 10-second comment, bringing AI skills for everyone has to be a national priority.
And then Abhishek, your closing words.
See, what I would say, I agree that bringing AI skills, plus at the same time, I would say bringing more global partnership for enabling sharing of applications, sharing of data sets, sharing of algorithms, and sharing of expertise. So if we bring it through summits, through conferences, more global sharing, it would really, really help us in moving forward.
Thank you so much. And again, to everybody here, to our distinguished panelists, to everybody in the room that's really contributed to what I thought was actually a very rich and engaging discussion, and to also your views here. Thank you so much for all being here today, and let's all thank our distinguished panelists with a quick round of applause. And to my online moderators and support from the UNDP, my thanks again to Co-Creation Hub and the Carnegie Endowment for co-organizing this event with us. Have a good day, everybody, and we hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did organizing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.